Hey, today we are going to solve some family history problems going through the process that every professional genealogist goes through when solving family history problems. But we're going to do it while telling a really fascinating story about Anton Woode. Now, Anton Woode was a young boy who was convicted of murder at the age of 11. And, well, I can't wait for you to see this, okay? So, welcome back to another Footnotes episode on Genealogy TV. Now, I call them footnotes because it's in the footnotes where the real sources are. And today's real source is Christine Cochran, making her second appearance on Genealogy TV. She is a professional genealogist out of Colorado. But before we get started, let me introduce myself. I am Connie Knox. I am a lifelong genealogist here to help you go further, faster, and factually with your family research. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you get notified each time I upload a video. Also, don't forget there is a newsletter and a Facebook page. If you are not linked up with those, please do so. Now also, everything we talk about, the newsletter, the Facebook page, and everything we talk about in the show are going to be in the show notes below. So right below the video, make sure you open up the Show More tab and you'll see everything that we're talking about today with links that are conveniently placed for you to get through. All right, now pay attention to this process because this is a process that every professional genealogist goes through when solving problems. And what is that process? Well, that process is developing a good research question, developing a plan, doing the research, going through the discovery process, and during that discovery process, we always discover conflicting evidence, right? Conflicting data. So we have to resolve the conflicts, and then we can come to a conclusion. Christine covers all of that in this episode while telling this really interesting story about Anton Woode. So, as a bonus, we get to learn about some prison records. Prison records that we hadn't known about really before until Christine kind of came across them. So, there are many lessons to learn, all while being entertained about the Anton Woode story. So, we're going to get started right now. Well, welcome back to another episode on Genealogy TV. I am so glad you're back again. I am so excited to hear about this story. I think the viewers are really going to get a kick out of this one. So go ahead and tell me what you've got planned here, because this is kind of a surprise for me and the viewers, but I think we're going to learn a lot here.
Thank you for having me back. I had so much fun on this show last time, and I've really been looking forward to recording this one again. We're going to be talking about the genealogical information that you can glean from prison records, which I was surprised at how much information that you can actually get from prison records. And I'm going to include in that a trip that I took down to the Colorado State Federal Penitentiary, which was the original Colorado Territorial Penitentiary before Colorado even achieved statehood. It was down in Canyon City. I got a chance to talk to the archivist there. She was good enough to take me downstairs to where the original archive records are and show me some wonderful stuff. We got some great information out of it. So I've got some slides to show you. Whenever you're ready, I will get started doing that.
Well, I have to ask though, first, what prompted you to get into this particular story? This wasn't a family member of yours, was it?
No, and I'm glad you asked me that question. I don't know if other genealogists do this. I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but you know, I've been doing family histories for so long. Well, I came to the point at one time, I guess a few years back, where I found that I could use the same skill set to research pretty much anybody I wanted to. And so if, you know, and in watching the show Finding Your Roots with Dr. Henry Louis Gates, which I watched that religiously,
right.
I thought, you know, I can go out and do this on anybody that I want to know some more information about. And again, I kind of try to focus on Colorado because that's where I'm at. I'm in Golden, Colorado. But it's like an adventure. I go on a little genealogy adventure because it takes me back in history. And all of a sudden, I'm researching the content around this person and, you know, how they came to do whatever it is that they do or whatever it was that captured my attention about them. And so I do this every once in a while. I'll find somebody and I'll think, well, no, that's an interesting person. I wonder what their genealogy is like. And I take off, and invariably I will learn about a new set of records that I hadn't worked with before,
Right.
or a new piece of history that I wasn't aware of, or a new way of life. So it's sort of a discovery journey for me, a process. And that's what happened this time.
Well, before we jump into this story real quick, for the viewers maybe who didn't catch the previous episode that we did together on the Southern Claims Commission, which was probably one of the hottest videos that we have on Genealogy TV. So again, thank you for that episode. But maybe I know that you've got some information you were going to share about your company so that everybody gets familiar with you, because all I did in the open was say that you are a professional genealogist out of Colorado. So tell us a little bit more about you first before we jump into this story.
So the reason I called my company Our Provenance is because of the word provenance, which is from the French word provenir, which means to come from. And I thought, that's very appropriate for genealogy. I'm always trying to figure out where somebody's coming from. It's also, there's like 3 different definitions that are, the second part of the definition is a place of origin or earliest known history of something, and I added in there, or someone. And the history of ownership of a valued object or a work of art or literature, and again, I would add into that, or person. So my belief is that we're all interconnected and related at some level, particularly if you go back, I mean, we're a young country. If you go back a couple of hundred years, you'll see great-great-great-grandparents that were in the same village together. And it's amazing how in just a couple of years, we've fanned out into this, fabulous nation. We all started at one little community somewhere. And so my philosophy is that we're all connected, interrelated by history, by family, by spirit, by what I call the collective conscience, and that we are the embodiment of the past, present, and future. Each one of us represents a story, and every one of those stories is unique and individual and special. And so when I'm studying your family history, and I focus mainly on doing genealogy within the United States, I don't go into other countries. I always jokingly say, once I get you on the boat and back over to your country, you're on your own. That's not really true. I'll put you in contact with another genealogist who does whatever country you're looking at.
Right.
But my feeling is, since I'm studying basically here in the United States, and my roots go back very, very far in the United States, when I'm studying your family, I'm really studying my own family. I'm studying our family. And so that's where the tagline for my company comes, because your provenance is our provenance.
Very good. Tell us about this story. I'm so anxious to hear about.
Okay, what we're going to be talking about is the plethora of genealogical information that's available from prison records. We're going to be uncovering the stories of our errant ancestors. And boy, the only thing more fun than doing genealogy is finding that you've got a little black sheep in the family, as long as they're a generation or 2 removed.
Yeah.
Talk about that. The reason I went down this path, I happened to be on the Denver Public Library's website, and they have a phenomenal online digital image collection. And I was flipping through that just because it's fascinating. It's one of those things I could lose a couple of hours doing. And this is a snapshot of the Denver Public Library Genealogical and Western History Department. This is their homepage. And you notice I've got circled there images of the past, photos and digital collections. So that's what I was looking for. Now there's, 30 or so images, and I was looking at photographs around the turn of the century, and I saw this photograph. Now this was one photograph of probably 30 on a page. And I'm flipping through them kind of fast, and I thought, wait a minute, did I just see that? And I flipped back again and looked at this image, and I thought, huh. And I started to go forward again, and there's something about this image that just captured me. It just almost haunted me right from the beginning. And I went back and looked at it. Now, it was around Halloween, and I thought, well, could he be, it looks like a little boy in a prison garb. Could he be dressed for Halloween? And I thought, well, having a prison number on his shirt sure is authentic. I find it hard to believe that most people would think to do that level of detail on a Halloween costume. And I looked again and said, well, is he really that young? And gosh, he does look young. So when I drilled down onto the picture, handwritten on the photograph was, and all of this is in quotes, Anton Woode, AKA Kid Wallace, killed someone in prison, killed night captain Rooney, and went over wall. Woode was captured on the toll road at Gate Road to Cripple Creek. Cripple Creek is one of the gold mining districts and silver mining districts in Colorado here. Brought back for $50 in back of buggy. McReynolds went to Florence to bring him back, ? Hung him from a telephone pole, left him overnight. Now notice the lack of punctuation in that entire quote. So I'm thinking, well, if the picture itself wasn't intriguing enough, this is even more intriguing. So now I've got to see what I can find out. And all kinds of questions came to my mind. Who was Anton Woode? How old was he? Where did he live? When was he born? Who did he murder? And why? What happened to Anton Woode? So what I did is I just sat down and I thought it would be kind of cool just to document, which I basically do anyways with a research plan, but I wanted to document and be able to just demonstrate to somebody else the thought process I go through as a genealogist. So here's what was written on the photo on one side of the page. On the other side is the facts that I got from that photo. I had one fact, and that fact was he had an inmate number of 3199, and that's because it was on his shirt. And that's the only real fact I had. I had several assumptions: that the boy's name was Anton Woode, that he was also known as Kid Wallace, that he killed a night captain in prison and escaped over the wall, that he was captured on the toll road at the gate road to Cripple Creek, that someone named McReynolds was paid $50 to retrieve him from Florence and return him via a buggy, and that he was hung from a telephone pole and his body was left there overnight. And I thought, this is just also very strange. This is very strange. So now anybody else might have taken that same writing on the photo and said, had a different set of assumptions. In fact, when I give a talk on this, which I do sometimes, just short talks, I find it very interesting to throw out to the audience, okay, what assumptions might you have made that I didn't think of? But everybody, that's where the wonderful genius of imagination, the human imagination comes in, I think. But these are the assumptions I started with. And so I put together a rough research plan. Okay, I've got some resources I can work with here. Colorado State Archives has an online presence and I can search there. Ancestry.com has census records and tax records. The Denver Public Library has digital images and directories and newspapers. The Denver County Courthouse has court records of the trial. Colorado State Department of Corrections will probably have prisoner records. And Colorado Historic Newspaper Collection is always a great place to go to find news. So what I did was I started off at the Colorado State Archives, and I just used these terms: inmate number 3199 and then the name Anton Woode. What I found were these record sets. Incarceration at Colorado, I found that he was incarcerated at Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City, Colorado, which is a maximum security facility. I found the State Board of Pardons biennial reports, which had in it that he was paroled 12 September 1905, and he was paroled to an Elbert Hubbard in East Aurora, New York. I thought, that's kind of interesting. I wonder who this guy is. Did a quick Google and found out that Elbert Hubbard is the founder of Roycroft Arts and Crafts Community in New York, which was one of the lead organizations in founding the arts and craft movement in the United States. I thought, wow, so this kid has gone from a federal state prison in Colorado to, the story it just gets curiouser and curiouser. So I also found the Colorado Governor's Book of Executive Orders, which shows that Anton was pardoned on 16 October 1906. Okay.
Wow. I'm already blown away.
Yeah. So that is the only thing I had done. I'd gone online to Colorado State Archives And I found all of this information in one fell swoop because this guy was a prisoner. So this is a photograph. I went back to the Denver Public Library online images collection and looked for Colorado State Penitentiary and found this photo from around 1900 to 1910, which is about the time that Anton Woode would have been there. And look at this place. It's massive. It's a fortress. It's got.
And you went over that wall.
Yeah, look at the size of that wall. It's got barbed wire on top of it. It's got lookout towers. I mean, it looks like one of our army forts or something. And I found out that it has been in continuous operation since 1871. Now that's before Colorado was a statehood. So it's been in continuous operation since 1871, which predates Colorado statehood. And it currently has 756 inmates in it. Now, I actually went down and visited this place. It is massive. It's massive. So I went back to the Colorado Online Digital Archives, and I just typed in Anton Woode just to see what would come up. And these two photographs came up. I thought, well, now that's interesting. So on my right, and I can't quite tell how you're seeing it there, but the boy in the striped shirt is the boy that I think I'm researching, Anton Woode. The other gentleman, or young, it looks like a young man, still, very young, but definitely much older than the other one, has a different prison number. You see, his is 3855. And I thought, well, now, could this be Anton Woode at a later date? Was he a repeat offender? But, I don't know. It just didn't look like the same person to me. So again, I've got more questions. You know how it is in genealogy. Yeah, you get one answer to a question and anywhere from 3 to 20 more pop up. So I wondered which one of these is actually Anton Woode. Well, I took a look at the state archives at the Colorado State Penitentiary inmate intake records. So I actually went over to the archives, the state archives, and here's what I found. He wasn't, in fact, Anton Woode was prisoner number 3199. So the little boy in the striped shirt is Anton Woode. He was convicted 5 April 1893. He was received at the penitentiary in 8 April 1893. His crime was murder. He murdered someone. He was sentenced to 25 years hard labor. He was sent from the Arapahoe County. He was 11 years old when he was sentenced. His physical description was he's 4 foot 3/8 inches tall, light complexion, and gray eyes. His occupation, an 11-year-old boy has an occupation, is farmer. And he was born in New York. Well, this young man just gets more and more interesting the more I learn about him. I learned a few more things from those same Colorado State Penitentiary inmate intake records that were at the Colorado State Archives. His parents were Thomas and Maggie Woode, and they lived in Brighton, Colorado. Ding, 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 ding. That's wonderful information, right? He was not married. Of course, he was 11 years old. He can read, he can write. He uses tobacco. So he either dipped or he smoked or both. Had he been in prison before? No, he had not. He can sign his own name. And then he had a certain number of scars and marks on him. He had very large ears that stand out from his head. This was actually written on his intake record. He hadn't grown into his ears.
A photograph too.
Yeah, he's a little boy. He hasn't grown into his ears yet. 2 moles on a right cheek, 4 moles on his left cheek, and a small scar on the left side of his head. Now, also handwritten on this inmate record was escaped over East Wall, 22nd January 1900. Returned to prison 25 January 1900. So it appears he made a break for it and was out for 3 days before he was recaptured. He was paroled on 13 September 1905, so 5 years later. And he was pardoned in 1906 by Governor McDonald. That's a lot of information from prisoner intake records. We've got a span there from 1903 of this boy's life from, is it 1903 to 1906? Actually, wow. Was it? Let's see. I'm sorry. We have a span from 1893 to 1906.
Yes.
Big chunk of his life. Now, one thing I wanted to point out here, and I'm going to take just a quick segue. Let's look at these last two slides. County seat sent from Arapahoe. That's Arapahoe County in the state of Colorado. His residence was in Brighton, Colorado. Now here I'm just going to make a quick segue and say it's very, very important at this that you understand the historic geography of the time and place that you're researching in genealogy. Now, my favorite go-to place to find this information is www.familysearch.org wiki page. And normally all I do is type in family search and space and the name of the wiki space and then the name of whatever place I'm looking for, the town, the county, whatever, the state. And it will give me information on how to research the genealogy in that area. I Googled Brighton, Colorado. Now, I know we have a Brighton here now. It's a vibrant community. It's a suburb of Denver. But I Googled Brighton just to see, well, how long has it been around? It turns out, Brighton is in Adams County, Colorado now. It was founded in the 1870s as a stage, railroad depot, and farming community. Now, remember on those previous records, his occupation, Anton's occupation was listed as farmer. So we've got some things that are starting to mesh up. It was incorporated in 1887, and it was considered then and is now a suburb of Denver, Colorado. Now, so what we know is that murder is a federal offense. So even back then, the trial would have been held in Denver because that's going to be the nearest federal court, right? So we got a lot of information out of there. And then I also took a look at the county facts for this area, and Denver is the county seat. It was organized in March 1901, and the parent county was Arapahoe County. So it's in Adams County now, but Adams County used to be part of Arapahoe County. Arapahoe County was the original county that went back to the Colorado territorial times. And I also know that the neighboring counties are Adams County, Jefferson County. That's good to know. You know, that's good information to know because I might need to go look at records there.
Absolutely. You always want to look at all the surrounding counties, especially.
Right. And so then this brings to mind, where should I actually be looking if I'm looking for the court records? So Denver's originally located in Arapahoe County. On March 18th, 1901, Denver County was carved out of Arapahoe County. Okay? So that's about the time that he was in prison. So according to the Colorado State Penitentiary inmates intake records, he was convicted in 1893 and he was received in 1893. So which county do I want to search for Anton's court records? Do I want to search in Denver? Do I want to search in Arapahoe? So those are the kind of questions that I want to make sure that as I'm going through this thought process in this presentation, I want to make sure that people see that. So, that's where I should start thinking about that. So we've already got a story. Anton's story is starting to come together for us. First of all, we know we have these facts that we verified. He committed a murder in 1892. He was 10 years old at the time of the crime. In 1893, he was sentenced to 25 years at the Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City, Colorado. His inmate number was 3199. He was born about 1882 in New York. He was from a farming family who lived in Brighton, Colorado, and his parents were Thomas and Maggie Woode. That's a lot of information in a short period of time that we've covered.
Well, so far, this is a fascinating story. I am riveted. And I understand that you dug into some census records too. So we're going to take a break right now. And when we come back, we're going to find out a little bit more about what's in those census records.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying watching Genealogy TV. I know that, you know, as a 40-year veteran in the broadcast industry and the genealogy industry, this was just kind of a marriage made in heaven for me, and I'm really enjoying putting these videos out. I hope you are getting something out of them and some sort of education. I am on my way to work this morning on this rainy morning. It is snowing a little north of here, but I just wanted to say hello and thanks so much for watching Genealogy TV. And hey, If you're getting something out of it, please consider dropping a buck or two in the tip jar. It helps me pay for the software and the gear that it takes to bring you these videos. So thanks so much for watching Genealogy TV. I really appreciate it.
Well, welcome back. Now, I understand that you're going to tell us some more about these census records. I am fascinated. I have so many questions in my head, but I'm trying to keep my lips shut so that you can tell us the story, because I'm taking notes. When he was convicted, he was 11 years old. His parents named Thomas and Maggie Woode. So I'm paying attention, but I'm keeping my mouth shut so you can tell the story. So
yeah, I agree. It is a captivating story. And here in the next section, we're going to go through the census records. And what I'm going to do is show what census records that I found Anton in and where I didn't, and how I ended up resolving that. So,
well, you know, and along the way for the viewers, one of the reasons why we're telling this story is because there are so many lessons to learn about genealogy through this story. And so I thank you in advance, or in continuation of this story, because there, so far, I mean, I could probably name 5 different lessons that you've already taught about doing genealogy, everything from good research questions to laying out the plan of what you're going to go after. And so I will let you continue now with census records.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to take a look at census records. We, of course, want to direct our focus to the census records that are actually applicable to this timeline. We know that the 1880 U.S. federal census records are going to be too early for Anton Woode because he was born in 1881. The 1890, sadly, are not extant because they were lost in a fire. So no 1890 census records. In 1900, we ought to be able to find Anton somewhere. Where should we look for him? Canyon City, Colorado, because that's where he was incarcerated in the penitentiary. But we'll also want to look for him in the 1910, the 1920, the 1930, and the 1940 census records. So what about the state records for Colorado? Well, Colorado has territorial census records from 1860, 1861, and 1866, but Anton was too young to be found in any of these. So we're not going to worry about those. We're going to look at the U.S. federal population census. So here's the 1900 census. I find Anton Woode. He's 18. He was born in January in 1882, but notice the census records has him in New Jersey. It shows he was born in New Jersey, and before we had seen New York. His relationship is prisoner. You know, you usually have head of house and how you're related to him. And well, he's a prisoner in the state penitentiary, so that's what he's listed at. His parents were both born in Poland, it says. Now, this is interesting. Now his occupation is listed as musician. I find that very interesting. So at 11 years old, he was a farmer. He's now 18. He's been in prison pretty much half of his life. And he is listing himself as a musician. He's a single white male who can read, write, and speak English. Then we go to 1910. Now we know he was released in 1903, and I can't find him. I know he was paroled in 1905. He went to New York. He was pardoned in 1906. I look at the 1910 census records. I think, well, maybe he's living with his parents. Maybe he's gone back to living with his parents. But he's not living with his parents in 1910, and they are living in the town of Thorpe in Clark County, Wisconsin. So what happened to Anton? So I look at the 1900 census records for his parents, and they're in Arapahoe County, Colorado. He's a farmer. His father's Thomas. His age is 49. It shows that he was born in Germany, and his parents were born in Germany. Now, earlier we had seen Poland, but we know how fluid those European boundaries can be over history. His wife, Maggie, is 45. She was born in Germany, and her parents were born in Germany. They've been married 30 years, and she can read, write, and speak English. Now I go to the 1910 census records and look for the same, his parents again. Again, now they're in Clark County, Wisconsin. So they've relocated. He's 58, Thomas is 58. He's from Germany, his parents were born in Germany. He immigrated in 1880 and was naturalized. Ding, 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 ding. We know to go look for naturalization records now, right? Maggie is 60 years old. She's Polish, but was born in Germany, and her parents are also Polish and born in Germany. She speaks English, but now this is 10 years later, it says she can read but cannot write. And 10 years earlier, it said she could read and write and speak English. Now it says she can read but cannot write. But I find the most interesting difference for Maggie in these two census records is that in 1900, she is listed as having had one child who is still living. That's Anton. He's in the federal prison. In 1910, she is listed as having borne 9 children, only one still living. That's still Anton in the prison. In 10 years, she bore 8 more children, and they all died. That's very sad.
Wow.
Now, if this is correct, I mean, if this was enumerated correctly, I mean, somebody's interviewing them and writing this information down. I mean, it's possible that she had children before then in 1900 and didn't know that she was supposed to say how many she'd had before, thought maybe she was only supposed to say how many she has now that are still living.
Well, if English was not her native tongue either in 1900, right, it might be that she didn't quite understand the questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some things to take into consideration there, okay? But that's a big difference. I mean, 8 children in 10 years. You know,
it could have been too that she had triplets or something that died at birth, or
yeah, that could very well be.
But that's a lot of kids to lose. Wow.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But now we have sort of a timeline that we have put together for Anton Woode, and timelines are wonderful things to use for census records. We know that he was born in New York or New Jersey in about 1882. We know that he committed murder in 1892. We know that he was sentenced to 25 years at the penitentiary in Colorado in 1893. We know that his parents are in Wisconsin in 1905. I found that on the Wisconsin State Census records. In 1905, also, Anton was paroled. So did they go to Wisconsin as soon as he was paroled, or did they go before then? That would be interesting to know. In 1906, Anton receives a pardon. So we know that Anton is in 1905, he's in New York, his parents are in Wisconsin. In 1906, he receives a pardon. In 1910, his parents are still living in Wisconsin. But what happened to Anton? We still have that question. So I decided to jump ahead to the next decennial census record and say, well, where was everybody in 1920? So I checked the U.S. Federal Population Census and could not find Anton's parents. I thought, well, I'm going to do a little reverse calculation here. I'm going to do a little reverse research. This is plan B. I can't find Anton. I can't find his parents. But I know his parents were in Wisconsin, so I'm going to search in Wisconsin. In 1920, he would have been about 37 years old. So I'm going to search for a 37-year-old male born in New York or New Jersey with parents who were Polish and see if I can get any hits. And in fact, I did in Dunn County, Wisconsin. I found a Charles H. Howard, who was head of the household. He was age 37. He was married, born in New Jersey. Both parents are Polish, born in Russia. Now, there's a lot of differences, discrepancies between the facts I've seen before and this. But this sounds like it fits our Anton Woode. He's married to a woman named Mabel. She's 36, was born in New York, as were both her parents. Did Anton maybe change his name to Charles H. Howard? Now, that's interesting. Now, we think about that, and okay, here's somebody who committed murder at the age of 10 and was sentenced to 25 years in maximum security prison. Do you think that might have made national news? Do you think that might have been a concern in his community? Do you think that he might have been, his life might have even been endangered if he were released from prison? You know, there could have been people that he was just insane. There could have been other people that thought that he just wasn't raised well, was from an impoverished area without a lot of opportunity. I see this being a very possible possibility. So I go back and I think, well, can I find this Charles H. Howard in the 1910 federal census? And I did. I find him in Orange, New York. Now we know that Anton Woode was sent to New York when he was put on probation. He was sent to New York to that community. And this young man is about the right age. He's 28 years old. He's been married once, and he's been married for 4 years. It says he's born in New York, but his parents are born in Vermont. Well, that's really odd. He's working as a bookkeeper, which if we go back here to the 1920 census, it says that he's working as a bookkeeper for the Millie Home Mortgage Company. So there's a similarity. The Vermont is a bit of a red herring or something that's thrown in there that we weren't expecting. But then there's his wife, Mabel, who's 27, about the same age. She's been married once for 4 years, born in New York, and both her parents are born in New York. This to me looks like the same couple. In fact, Anton Woode did become Charles Henry Howard after he left the penitentiary. Now, I found out later on, and I'll get into that a little later, that he actually didn't want to change his name. He wanted to keep his name. But he actually had to be escorted to New York because his life was in danger as soon as he set foot out of the prison, is what my understanding was. People were angry that he was being let loose. Some people saw him as a psychopathic maniac and that this was a terrible decision. So we know that he was paroled when he was 23 years old. This is a photograph of Anton Woode as a young man, 23 years old, heading out into the world for the first time. What a handsome devil he is. Huh?
He's a good-looking kid.
He's a good-looking young man. He did change his name to Charles Henry Howard. He went to work, as we said, in New York at Roycrofters, which is a leader in the arts and crafts movement in America. That's very interesting. He married Mabel Estelle Terry on June 4th, 1906 in Newburgh, New York. And interestingly, Mabel's father is a judge.
Oh, wow.
This just gets more and more interesting.
Yeah, you wonder if he ever told the family what happened.
Oh, I'm pretty sure the family knew. I'm pretty sure his dad knew that he had served time in the penitentiary. It would be if he was there on probation and had people looking over him, it may be that was the judge that he had to report to, in addition to the letter that he sent back to the Canyon City. I'm pretty sure that Mabel's family knew of his past. So this is very interesting. This is intriguing. So let's go back to our original research plan here. We had 6 sources that we were going to check with a list of records we were hoping to find there. We've only searched half of those research sources so far, and we haven't even researched or searched all of what could have been there. All we've looked at is the digital images. We've looked at the Colorado State Archives, and we've looked at Ancestry.com census records. We've gotten a lot of information here. So this is kind of one of the reasons I wanted to put this back up here is this is kind of a good indication to people that you start off with a research plan, but if you're going along on that research plan and you find that there are other resources out there with information that more directly answers what your questions are, then that's when you go down those rabbit holes. But come back to the original research plan and make sure you document the new rabbit holes you're going to go down, just so that you can keep on track and remember what you've looked at. But I just want to bring this up because we haven't even looked at all of the sources yet. Now, I'm going to talk about the court records here. I thought it would be very interesting to see the court case records around this event. So I decided that I was going to look for those records at Denver County Courthouse. The state archive says we have the Denver County court records archived here for that period of time. but we need to know the case number. We don't have them archived by the person's name. We wouldn't have them by Anton Woode's name. They would be under the name of Anton Woode and not the name that he assumed afterwards. And he would have been tried under the name Anton Woode. So go over to the Denver County court records and find out what the case numbers are, and we can help you get those court records. So I go over to Denver County court records, and they say, well, we don't have the case numbers, but we can tell you where the ledger books that contain those case numbers are for the years that he was there. So they wrote down on a piece of paper, here's where they're located. Go back over to state archives, give them this, they'll know what to do. So that's what I did. I trotted back over to the state archives, and I said, ta-da, I got the ledger where they're supposed to be. And they looked at it and they said, and they go back and they scuttle around and they come back and they said, well, these are where these ledger records are kept. However, the dates that we have do not coincide with the ledgers that they gave you. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull those ledgers for you for the dates that you actually need, not the ones that they gave us. But those happen to be kept on an off-site facility, and we won't be going to that till next month. Oh, okay. So we'll get them for you next month. All right. So a month goes by, and I hadn't heard anything. I write back to him and said, hey, did you get those records in? And they said, oh, you know what? We forgot to do that. It'll have to be next month. So this is kind of, don't get frustrated. Sometimes it takes time to get this stuff. And since this presentation isn't really on court records anyways, it's on prison records, I just wanted to let people know out there that it's not a quick and dirty thing. You're not going to walk up to the courthouse or walk up to the state archives and say, here that they might have them, they might not, and you might go through a little back and forth. And don't let that discourage you. Sometimes it takes years to get all of the information collected that you're looking for. So I decided, since we're looking at prison systems of Colorado, I thought, well, okay, I need to know, where do I go to actually find these prison records if they're not at the state archives? Well, there's two sources. There's the Colorado Department of Corrections, and there's the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So we have state level prisons and federal level prisons in Colorado, as they do in every state in the United States. The Colorado Department of Corrections, I learned, has 20 state-run prisons. They're affiliated with 7 for-profit prisons in Colorado, and they currently contract with 3 for-profit prisons, which means that of the 7 that they've worked with in the past, they're currently only working with 3. There's also the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which are for the federal prison systems. And you can go, I put these websites on here for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. You can actually go onto that website and locate federal prisons by state, or you can locate a federal inmate. But that's only current federal inmates. We're interested in somebody from the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s. So I said to them, where do I go to get these records? Well, surprisingly, I find out that when they're done with the records down at Canyon City, they give them to the Museum of Colorado Prisons. I thought, there's a Museum of Colorado Prisons? And they said, and you gave them to a museum rather than to the state archives? Yes, they did. Now, in my mind, I'm picturing one of the, little tourist towns that we have here in Golden, which are a lot of fun. But they have the little shops, with the kitschy little museums and the little souvenirs. And that's what I had in my mind. Boy, did I turn out to be wrong about that. And as a genealogist, boy, was I thrilled when I found out what I really was going to encounter here. This museum is located in Canyon City, Colorado. I've given the link to this organization. And I actually scheduled an appointment with the archivist there and went down and visited this prison. This museum houses the archives for 25 federal and state prisons. It's located in what was originally the Women's Correctional Facility built in 1935. Now notice there that the Women's Correctional Facility was built in 1935. This is a territorial prison system that started off pre-statehood in 1887. That means the women were thrown in with the men until 1935 when they had separate accommodations. That's amazing.
That is amazing. That's That's almost comical.
Yeah, it's comic tragic, isn't it? I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, not only that, well, the stories, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's located adjacent to the Colorado State Territorial Penitentiary, which it's still called to this day, even though it's a federal prison. This is a maximum security facility. So this museum is located right next door, and it actually it's a part of the prison grounds. So
Thus the barbed wire in the background. I can see.
yes, yes, that's not decorative. That's the real stuff. On the other side of that wall is an interesting community of people.
Wow.
But these are felons. These are people who have committed heinous crimes. What I find out is that this museum houses these kinds of records. They have an inmate index by name. They have an inmate intake book. They have the prisoner good time ledger, which is the behavioral records of the prisoners while they were incarcerated there. They have mug shots, which are the original glass plates, mug shots of these prisoners, all the way back to 1887.
No way.
Yes, they have microfilm of parole and case records. This is a treasure trove.
And how many federal prisons did you say? 25?
It's 25 federal and state prisons. I believe they have 5 federal prisons.
Well, there's a find right there, isn't it?
Oh my gosh! Again, you just see that ding, 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 ding go off in any genealogist. I mean, I saw your eyes widen as
Yeah. Well, again, I'm trying to keep my mouth shut, but the questions and thoughts are running amok here.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that just sends a genealogist over the moon. Oops, sorry. Now, this on one side, you see this is the entrance into the archives. I made an appointment with the archivist there. She could not have been more accommodating. She actually took me down to see the original records in the basement, and I actually had to go through this prison door here to get to these records. On the other side of the screen, you see these are some of the original records going back to 1887. These are the original ledger books. Now, most people, when they come in, on the first floor, on the entry level, she has copies of these in binders so that people can look through those, so that these records which are fragile, aren't damaged. And while we were in there, we were wearing white gloves. She said that when she took over this archive, I think it was about 11 years ago, they led her down to a room with a stack of books, and this is what she has accomplished in this time. She still has a lot of work, could use some grant money and volunteer elbow grease and stuff, but this is a wonderful find. Now, this is a snapshot of the inmate index. It's wonderful that she's been able to index these. I mean, this is a lot of work. So you can look up, this is listed by, let's see, this one is by number. And you notice there is Anton Woode, prisoner number 3199. So she knows that she has in her index on page 130, 138, 153, and 155, she has information on Anton Woode. That's great. So let's go take a look at what Anton Woode. So here's the prisoner behavior records. Now notice that she's got the white gloves on. She's got low lighting there. She's handling the original ledger book there. And if you see over to the side here, this is Anton Woode's record. And it's pretty hard to read, I understand, but it actually talks about him losing points, I guess you'd say, for his breakout of prison. Okay, so now here's another book that she has the original, and the name on this one really cracks me up, The Prisoner Good Time Book. I'm like, really? They're not supposed to.
No, it looks like it almost looks like a comedy show, right? Like that.
Yeah. I was half afraid for her to open this. It's like, I don't know if I want to know what a prisoner good time looks like. But this is actually listing out their good behavior and their bad behavior. It's another record of what they've done. And this is so that the other people who are managing the prison can look back over their records if they have a change in staff, and they can say, well, he's wanting to have this little privilege of how's he been doing? How's his record looking? That's what the prisoner good time book is about. So here's the prisoner account ledgers. Now this was something new for me. I knew that when you went into prison, you worked. You didn't just lay around and read magazines and all day long, but you had to work. What I did not know is that you're required to be paid for your work. So the prisoners are actually paid for their work, and this is an account of the work they did and the amount of money that they have in their account that they were paid for the work. So they could take money out and go to their little, they had like a little store that the prisoners.
Commissary, yeah.
Yeah, and they like a commissary. Thank you. So I was actually amazed at this because I thought, okay, 25 years hard labor, they're going to throw them out in a quarry pit in Colorado and have them breaking rocks for 10 years, right? Or 20 years or whatever. But they had all different kinds of jobs and they were actually compensated for it. Now you think about this and you go back to the concept that this is a correctional facility. And what becomes very evident to me by following Anton's prison career is that these people are really trying to help these people get back on the right track. They're trying to teach them skills that they can use and make them productive citizens. And this book is testimony to this. And this covers all of the years that Anton is in prison, how much he had when he started and how much he had in the beginning. Of course, he had nothing. He was 11 years old. So, but he's got a pocket full of change when he walks out of the prison system. And this is a record of how he earned his money.
Did you ever find out how much he had when he walked out the door?
It wasn't a lot. I think it was like $35 or something, but he walked out the door in 1923. $35 is different. I don't think it would have been a lot of money, but it would. I believe they provide them with a suit of clothes, and they try to help them find a job when they're on parole. And then they have whatever pocket money they earned while they were in prison. And I don't think they have anything more than that. Everything else they earn after that, they earn out in the quote-unquote real world. Honestly, we hope from then on. We know that's not always the case, but that's the hope. Now, here's another thing that they have, which I found fascinating. This is the actual original glass plates for the mugshots of the prisoners. That one shirt, that is the original for what I showed at the very beginning of this, and the one on the other side is him at age 23 being paroled.
Wow.
Yeah, I just thought that was really cool.
Very cool.
Now, let's talk about the historic newspaper collection. Colorado has something called the Colorado Historic Newspapers Collection that is free and online. And I'm going to give you the link to that so that you can give that to all of your viewers. But these newspapers, I think the newspapers fill in a lot of facts, but also personality. Now remember, the people who are writing these articles, they're supposed to be giving you facts, but they're giving you a slant and they're giving you a story because if they don't have an interesting story, they're not selling newspapers. And that's what they're there to do. They're a business, right? So here is an interesting article that I got out of this Colorado Historic Newspapers collection from the Pueblo Chieftain, dated March 2nd, 1893, page 1, column 3. Page 1. This was major news back in these days. And it's under a column that they call Their Happy Thought. The name of the article is Denver Doctors Disagree. Now, I found this hysterical. And I'm just going to read this to you. Denver, Colorado, March 1st. Dr. Estridge and Dr. Eugene Grissom, two of Denver's leading physicians, engaged in a personal encounter in the office of the former in the Equitable Building at 10:30 this morning. The trouble resulted from a dispute over a scientific question which was raised while discussing the testimony of Dr. Grissom given in the trial of Anton Woode, the 10-year-old boy who killed Joseph Smith, a hunter near Brighton a few months ago, to get possession of the murder man's watch, and evidently with no thought that he was doing wrong. Now, I want to stop there just for a moment and remind you that genealogy was a profession in Colorado at this point in time. Physicians actually thought that the bumps and the shape of your head determined what your personality was. it could very well be. I can go back through and do a search for phrenology in the census records and find people who are listing themselves as phrenologists. So that's just a little thought. But this also, excuse me, this also was one of those situations where everybody was interested in this story and everybody had a position on it. So I'm going to continue. The case was excited unusual interest in medical circles. Dr. Grissom called at Dr. Eskridge's office this morning and asked for a reference book bearing upon the subject, testified to the suit. The discussion then began, and Eskridge questioned the truth of Dr. Grissom's testimony. Okay, this is 1893. A person's honor is at stake. The doctor resented this and, raising his cane, struck Eskridge over the head. Friends interfered there, and there will probably be no further hostilities. But these two doctors are packed into fisticuffs over it. This is the kind of color that newspapers fill in.
I love newspapers.
We got some facts there, too. We found out that Anton was imprisoned for shooting a man, and he shot the man to gain possession of his watch.
Yeah, I was going to ask, but I didn't want to spoil it. I was, because the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, well, who did he murder?
Yeah, well, and so far the records we've looked at hadn't really told us that. So, Colorado Historic Newspaper Collections again comes through with another article from the Aspen Evening Chronicle, dated March 25th, 1893. Again, page 1, column 3. So this is front page information. Anton Woode is found guilty. Youthful Anton Woode will probably be given 2 years. Now notice that when we looked at his intake record earlier, we found that he was committed for 25 years sentence, hard labor. This was a surprise. Because of his age, he was expected to only be given 2 years. And he ended up being given 25 years. Now, he didn't serve all 25 years. But this kind of gives you the idea of the teeter-tottering that was going back and forth in between the community. Evidently, the jury had a hard time deciding this issue because they were having to decide, is this a boy who's had an unfortunate upbringing and could do better if put in the right circumstances? Or is this actually a psychopath who is killing from an early age and will continue to think in this manner for the rest of his life? Was this 10-year-old boy able to discern right from wrong? I'm
sitting here reading some of these quotes. Don't cry about it, his attorney said, but Anton pulled from his pocket a handkerchief from his coat pocket and commenced wiping the tears from his eyes. It's heartbreaking.
It is. It is heartbreaking. I agree. I'm glad you feel the same weight of it that I do, because this weighed heavily on my heart while I was looking through these records. Of course, his attorney motions for a new trial. And the last paragraph there says, on Woode's first trial, the jury disagreed as the majority thought that he was insane. So the doctors were probably brought in to testify, is the boy insane or not? I mean, even today we have trouble discerning, where is that fine line where a person has crossed over from eccentric to insane? Where is that fine line where a child knows the difference between right and wrong? Where is that line? And
nowadays we have so much better diagnosis of mental illness or everything from ADD to all kinds of things that that they didn't have those diagnoses for back then.
Yeah, and notice that the last line in this article says that Anton Woode freely confessed his guilt. So he knew he'd done something wrong. So that's to his favor in this particular. And, again, we're looking through the lens of the Wild West in 1893 in Colorado.
In a different time, a different mindset, yeah.
I went back and I thought, well, who is this 3855 prisoner? Because is this Anton Woode? And I found out that through a newspaper article that I found the article of Anton making a break for it. He had broken away from prison. Remember, we saw in some of the prison records in his behavioral records. They said he got docked because he had escaped. Well, the story came to trial, and as it comes out, he was working in a boiler room doing one of his chores that he got paid for there at the prison, and a couple of other prisoners had masterminded this break and took him hostage. They said, "You go with us or we kill you." And they killed, it was one of them that killed the prison guard. So Anton was actually swept up in this, and it was not his doing. He had to do it to avoid being killed. They were holding a knife to his throat. And he escaped and ran, and they actually ran in different directions. He went with one guy, and then two of the others went in another, and I think there was yet one other guy that went in a different direction.
And now, did you get that information from newspapers or from court records or what?
I got it from newspapers.
Okay.
So it starts filling in some of these details that wouldn't have been in the prison records, because that would have been dealt with at the court records. I haven't been able to get the court records yet, but here comes the newspaper, and thank goodness they start filling in this information. Well, the guy that actually committed the murder of the prison guard was a hardened criminal named Frank Wallace, and was also known as Kid Wallace. Well, remember the writing that we saw and the assumption that I made on the very first slide? His name was Frank Wallace, and he was prisoner 3855, who practically abducted Anton. And then Anton got outside and was scared and ran, is basically what happened. And 3 days later, he was caught and brought back. Now, the other thing that I should tell you is that there was another guy that was with him named Slim, and I can't remember what his name was. Maybe that was this Charles Wagner that's here. No, this was Frank Wallace. Oh yeah, the other guy who had helped with this prison escape was Charles Wagner, and he was also known as Slim. Well, the community had heard that these prisoners escaped, that they had murdered one of the guards. And when they found out that these guys had been captured and were being brought back to the prison, they're like, no, we're not paying any more tax dollars on these guys. And they took Slim and they hung him outside the state penitentiary in Canyon City, Colorado. And that was the person who was left for dead and hung overnight.
It was not the kid.
That's right. What an interesting turn of events.
Well, and digging into the facts, you found the true story there. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. I'm glad that you're finding this as fascinating as I did. So who was Anton Woode? So here's what we learned about Anton Woode. He was the youngest person ever to be incarcerated in the Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City, Colorado. Now, I had asked the question, why was he not put in a boys' home of some sort? It turns out that what I'm being told, and I haven't confirmed this, but what I'm being told is that the judge thought Anton's mother was lying about his age. He thought the boy was actually several years older than he really was.
So he wanted to keep him with adults. Okay.
Right. And the other thing is that because of the outrage of the community who thought this boy was insane, had they put him in a boys' home, he probably would have been sought out and murdered, if not by the boys in the home, then by the community. So he's actually almost put in there for his own safety. And because of the fact that he was considered, there was still a possibility that he was insane, that was the other reason he was put in a maximum security prison, because there was going to be a huge uprising in the community if he was not.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah, this story is just incredible. It's an inflaming story for the community. So he's committed murder at the age of 10 in Brighton, Colorado. He shot a man named Joseph Smith in the back with a musket for his gun and his gold pocket watch. He was sentenced to 25 years hard labor in Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City. He escaped, quote unquote, from the prison on January 2nd, 1900, along with Frank Kid Wallace, Charles Wagner, and, okay, here's his name, Thomas Slim Reynolds. A prison guard, William Rooney, was killed. Slim was later hanged by the crowd in front of the penitentiary where he was left overnight. Those were the notes that were put on that were handwritten on that image that I found in the Denver Public Library online image collection. It turns out that Anton was incredibly bright. He loved school. He had artistic and musical talents, which he developed while he was in prison. He learned to play the violin and led the prison band. He taught himself to read, write, and speak French and German while he was in prison. This kid was really sharp.
Wow.
Really sharp. His story inspired later on a judge by the name of Benjamin Barr Lindsay to lead the formation of a separate system for juvenile offenders in Colorado in 1903. He was following the story very closely. And sadly, Anton Woode, we finally learned, died on the 8th of March in 1950 of cancer. As we recall, he was a tobacco user from a very young age. He died in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the age of 68. Now, I don't know how he ended up in Minnesota, but we do know that he died there. Now, here's some other interesting information I learned from the newspaper articles. And also a book that was written on Anton, and I'm going to give you the reference from that by a gentleman named Kreck, I believe it was Kreck, wrote a book on Anton. At the time of Anton's conviction, Anton's parents were impoverished Russian-Polish immigrants who had moved to Colorado to labor on the farms. And I have something incorrect there. I thought it was the beet farms in the beginning. It turns out it was a vegetable farm.
Okay.
Father was alcoholic. So Anton was the only one of his parents' 9 children to survive to adulthood. Anton was drinking 20 cups of coffee and alcohol, beer and whiskey, at the age of 10 on the day he committed the murder. He ate mostly bread and eggs. This was a normal diet for him, to have 20 cups of coffee a day and swig beer and whiskey. Can you imagine taking any 10-year-old boy today, giving him 20 cups of coffee and alcohol, and then setting him loose outside? Oh, my word.
Yeah, something's not right there.
Children were not required to attend public school at the time that Anton was a little boy. Anton would love to have gone to school. He often traveled miles on horseback from Brighton to Denver to attend school when he could. And then he'd turn around and travel back so he could finish his farm chores in the evening. He loved school and was incredibly bright. He did not have access to school. At the time that he was convicted, there was no delineation between juveniles and adults in the court system, and children were judged and sentenced as adults. Boys' homes were inexistent, but he was thought to be too dangerous to be placed in one. Some thought he was a born murderer and he should have been given the death sentence immediately. They thought he was a monster and he was a freak of nature. His case made national headlines in newspapers across the United States and ended up inspiring not only the formation of a juvenile court system here in Colorado, but in other states across the United States. And then when he was released and put on parole, he was given a new name and escorted to New York for fear he would be killed while crossing the Colorado border. If I understand correctly, and I haven't confirmed this yet, which is why I don't have it written here, but I believe it was actually the prison warden's son who escorted him.
Interesting.
Yes, he had been taken under the wing of the warden of the prison and was not considered dangerous by any of the people that worked at the prison. From my understanding from the archivist who was down at Canyon City Museum of Colorado Prisons is that he was allowed to go into town, walk into town, and buy the art supplies and things that he needed. He was not considered a threat to anybody or a danger. And that's the story of Anton Woode and the type of information that you can get from prison records. I mean, this is a very rich source of genealogical information that helps you put together a story that, in the beginning, we might have also thought, oh my gosh, a 10-year-old boy who murdered someone. Here's a man who went out into society, became a productive, contributing individual, married the daughter of a judge. So in the long run, he ended up proving who he really was. He was a kid that was probably neglected and abused and in a bad situation, and once given an opportunity, proved himself to be, I think, a good man. Now, there were people in Colorado who never forgave him. Of course, Joseph Smith's family never forgave him, always thought of him as insane. You talk to people today and tell them that a 10-year-old committed murder, and they're going to tell you that kid's insane. You know, and maybe sometimes that is the case. But boy, what a story we got from following his genealogy, and then pulling the information we got from the prison records, and then supplementing that with news articles and things we found in the census records to see what actually coincided and what was actually factual, and what was probably a little bit of a story or artistic license, maybe. But yeah.
I love it. Well, and again, so many lessons learned in your case study here, and I find it interesting. And boy, you certainly have been bitten by the bug to chase a story that's not even in your own family or a client's family. But I think it's awesome, because one of the things that I'm always talking about is it starts with curiosity. And when you tripped across that photograph originally and tripped across it again, you go, wait a minute, I got to go back and look at that again. The curiosity got you. And as it turns out, you have done a great job pulling that story together and correcting some of the things that were incorrect. I think some of the information on the back of that photograph that was written on the back turned out to not be correct. Yes.
Yes.
It was somebody else that was hung. And
that's right. He was not hung. He was not Kid Wallace. But had you taken just that photograph at the beginning, he would have sounded like quite the bad character. And there was plenty of framework there to support that. This boy captured the imagination, my imagination, in the same way that he had captured the imagination of people across the United States, and opened up a lot of ethical questions that people debated, and there were good conversations to have. Some good things came out of that. But the nice thing about it is now your viewers are going to know, wow, I could get an awful lot of information from the Museum of Colorado if I had someone who served time as a prisoner in the state of Colorado. I've got 6-8 different resources to go. Really, it's a little sad, a little macabre maybe, but if you have a relative that you're researching who served time, he or she is probably more likely to be documented than somebody who didn't.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you know what I think you said there was 25 federal and state prisons that are archived there, right?
Yeah.
Is there a list of what those are? Do they have that maybe on their website?
They do not have that list that I could find. However, if you contact the archivist, I'm sure she would let you know.
Now, are they outside? Whoops, sorry to hit the microphone. Are they outside of Colorado? Those 25? Are they strictly Colorado?
So these are Colorado state and federal prisons. So these are federal prisons inside the state of Colorado.
Okay.
I think there were 5 of them, and then also the state penitentiaries or the state prison systems. And they're of different levels, and that's another interest. I mean, there are so many rabbit holes you can go down in researching this story. There are different levels of prison system, in anywhere from very, very low security to maximum security. And Canyon State Penitentiary, Territorial Penitentiary, is what they call a level 5, which is a maximum. So that's where the really bad folks go to.
What a great resource, and what a lot of really great lessons for anyone to kind of understand, because you definitely followed that methodology of a case study and creating the research questions, the research plan, digging into each one of those resources, and boy, did you come up with some resolution. So
and I appreciate you giving me the leeway you did, because what was really important to me is that I unfold the thought process of how we got, and we could go out there and do a scattershot approach. But what I wanted to show is what information you were gaining at each step through each different resource and through the records, each different set of records in that resource. And there's a lesson to be learned in that, because if you do that scattershot effect, I mean, you can always go out on the internet and Google anything. make sure that you check the references for whatever you come up with on Wikipedia or whatever. Where did they get that information? Question the source, always question the source. Newspapers are wonderful. They do a great job. There are fact checkers in newspapers today. Were there fact checkers in newspapers in 1893? Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe not.
So keep that in mind too. You're right, there's a lot of great genealogy lessons in this story.
So in my experience, one of the things that I have discovered, and I'm sure you have too, and especially for amateur genealogists, a great lesson to learn is, instead of going after that shotgun blast approach where you just type in the search and see what pops up, if you create that research plan, you will actually spend less time doing research in the long run. Like the overall, like this story that you just presented today probably took you less time to research it, because you methodically went and you said, I'm going to do this, 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 I'm going to look here, I'm going to look here, knowing exactly where you needed to look, as opposed to just plugging in some search, let's just see what we can find here and there.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head there. That is such a crucial point to get across to people who are just learning. We've all done it. I've done it. I've chased after the bright, shiny things. I've just, I'm going to Google this and now I know all the answers. And then as I started documenting it, I started realizing, well, hey, some of this isn't quite right. And that's always a temptation. That's always a temptation. Anybody who's starting, it's a temptation for those of us who've been doing it for many, many years. To, every once in a while, I kind of just let myself go and do those kind of rabbit searches, because sometimes they're kind of fun. But I realized at that point that I've let go of actually doing methodic genealogical research. It doesn't mean that you have to follow that research plan to the letter. You may find some other information. Make sure you write that down if you go down that rabbit hole. And also, the very act of writing down what you're going to research makes you think, okay, now why am I researching this? Because you're looking for, this is your goal on your research plan. And I think another thing too is putting in the search terms. Those things are important to remember. I would not have had the hits I had I gone onto the state archives and put in WOODE. I had to chop that E off to get to some of the records that I needed. And the other thing is, speaking of the state archives, when you're searching on the state archives, the Colorado State Archives, make sure that if they have particular groups of records, you select just that group that you're interested in. I was searching corrections records. That's what I was looking for. Now, I might open it up if I don't find it, or just because I'm curious, just to see what else is out there. But, there's probably 24 different categories of records that are listed online. And that's a very, very small fraction of what they actually have there. And who knows how much time you're going to spend researching hits on the first 3 that have nothing to do with what you're actually trying to find. Another thing is, the archivists become your friends as a genealogist. Never assume that if you did an online search that you've gotten everything in that archive. These archivists will, at Colorado State Archives, and when I go in there, they'll say, by the way, when you were searching on such and such, I thought of something after you left. I always leave a card so they can get hold of me. And they will follow up. Things will occur to them at a later date, which we're all human. It didn't always come to us right there at the flash of the moment. But leave a card and say, hey, this is how you get hold of me. If you think there's anything else I need to look at, let me know.
Sometimes I think these archivists and librarians, I think they catch your curiosity like you catch a cold, right?
Yeah.
So you go in and you tell them this story about what you're researching, and they help you the best they can. You leave a card behind. They've caught your cold. They've caught your curiosity. And sure enough, that's happened to me more than once, where people have gotten back to me, or I have gotten back to them going, you know what? What about so-and-so records? Another tip too, when you were talking about a whole list of resources, and if you kind of methodically go through that list and you go, 1, 3, 5, and 7 are the ones that I want to look at. My favorite trick is to right click, open in a new tab, right click, open in a new tab. And what I'll then do is go to the different tabs and research it on that tab for that record set and go, nope, he's not there, close that tab. And I just go down the tabs until I've researched all 5 of those things that were in that original list, leaving the original list open so that I know where I originally started. Instead of clicking through and opening something else up, and then having to go back to get back to that original list that I had found.
Oh, I think that's an excellent idea.
Well, I appreciate you telling this story. It is fascinating and has been absolutely a blast listening to you tell the story and give us some insight into the Colorado prison system archives that we now know is available to us as well.
And that applies to any state in the United States. I mean, this is an example I use because I live in Colorado. That's where I research. But I know full well that if I had an ancestor I was researching in another state, I know that I have this venue. It might be a different architecture framework, but this applies to any state in the United States.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you for having me. I've had so much fun, as usual.
I love it. You can come back as often as you want. I love listening.
Some more ideas I'll roll out to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great story. I know that there was a lot of information there to absorb. So again, links are in the show notes below. If you like that, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell. You know the drill. Also, don't forget there's a newsletter and a Facebook page. So make sure you are hooked up with all of those. And boy, I hope you like that one. Christine always rocks the house with every video she brings us. So thank you, Christine Cochran. All right, until next time, keep on climbing your family tree.